Hello, I thought I'd follow up with the I don't like modern pressings video with a little selection of some of the comments that I've received and some of my responses to those and some thoughts. I'd also thought I'd detail the two LPs which I fundamentally thought were problem-free out of the 20 that I received. So let's start with the LPs that I found to be problem-free. And the first one is New Street Adventures, their album No Hard Feelings. It's really well recorded. Even if it is on coloured vinyl, that is acceptable when the surface noise is really in the background and hardly noticeable. Only on very, very quietest passages is it known, but absolutely click-free pressing, beautifully recorded. There's lots of separation and detail. It's got a nice wide sound stage, which is one of the things I find problematic with a lot of new pressings. They don't seem to have any sound stage at all, really. Very, almost like listening in mono in a lot of respects, very condensed. But that, really well pleased with that recording. The other one is Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. This is a live album, live at Montreux and the North Sea. Again, flat, click-free, beautifully recorded, very ambient. You know, for a live recording, it's everything you want to hear. You want to hear some reaction from the audience. You want to hear some excitement in the playing. Live to the extent as well, somebody obviously at some point has a badly connected instrument or microphone or something, because you can hear that ominous buzz in the background where something's not quite plugged in. But it gets plugged in quite quickly, so that's okay. Again, it has really good depth of recording, a good spread left to right. All the instruments have their own place on the sound stage. All the instruments are well delineated. You can hear each of them in isolation, in the context of the band all playing together. Very, very good album, and highly recommended. The one that got my biggest dislike is the Tina Turner, her first solo album, Turns the Country On. Now this is a 50-year reissue, and it said it's a half-speed master reissued on 180-gram heavyweight vinyl, and it says this recording was cut on a fully customised late Newman VMS 80 lathe with fully recapped electronics from a 192 kilohertz restored masters of the original master tapes, with no additional processing in the transfer, and yet it sounds awful. I've never come across such a poor dynamic recording. The vocals are recessed, the bass is bloated, everything's condensed in quite narrow. Didn't enjoy that at all, really. So, oh, excuse the general mess on the table here. I'm still going through my flood damage re-sleeving exercise. I think I'm 50 in. I'm only doing about 8 or 10 a day. So I've got a long way to go yet. probably another 150 to go. So some of the comments I've received after posting that video, like quality control is a lost art. As is proven by a couple that I did get, it's not really a lost art, and there's no such thing as 100% quality checking. I mean, that's just would be phenomenally expensive, and that's something that perhaps we'll touch on later on with some of these really high cost issued albums, like what are the ones that are quite highly thought of? UHQR, for instance, but they charge £150 or 100, nearly £200 in some instances for their LPs. But certainly there's no, if the quality of the stamper is inspected, that should give a better quality pressing. And I think that's where the fault lays, when you get some dirt in the pressing itself from the stamper. And coloured vinyls are almost impossible to see if there's any groove damage. Transparent ones are even worse, so they must be a nightmare to quality control. And anyway, it will never be anything more than batch quality assessments. So there will be a number of LPs that get through that have imperfections. Either I've been completely unlucky in getting 90% of mine, I think should be rejected. I don't know. Somebody quoted, "What I own, I listen to." At what point does your record collection, CD collection, reach a saturation point? I look at some of the people who are talking about new releases, some of these vinyl collectors on YouTube, and behind them they have a vast array of LPs, many thousands upon thousands of them, and they're producing videos about the latest batch of 10 they bought, the latest batch of 20 they bought, and so on. I mean, the 20 I bought took me nearly 2 months to buy. Some people can't possibly listen to every LP in their collection. You know, if I started at one end of mine and decided to play 3 or 4 albums a day, it would probably take me the best part of 3 years. And I don't consider I've got that large a collection, probably 1,500 LPs and a similar number of CDs. So do these collectors buy for their collection value, buy for their collection, listen to them once, and then tick them off the box, stick them in? I've got that one, good, that's signed off. So do they buy, listen once and file away? I don't know. I'm not a collector, I am a listener. And I think that there should be a large distinction between somebody who collects for the sake of collecting and somebody who collects to listen to their stuff. And even I have to admit, there are LPs in my collection that have never been on the turntable for perhaps 20 years. So I can't imagine how people who've got 20 or 30,000 LPs would ever get around to playing them all. Remastering for remastering's sake, a world of hype. Certainly there seems to be a need to constantly reissue classics, and this is perhaps a need to continually monetize the recordings. if I go back to Demons and Wizards, by Uriah Heep, one of my favourite all-time albums, there must be at least 10 copies of that out, have been remastered in different forms over the years, and I've got several of them. Probably won't buy any more. The remasters have never really given me as much joy to listen to as the original recordings. And certainly things like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon have become a vast monetizing effort, and they're constantly issuing different versions of it. I've got several versions of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, but I have to say not one single one of them on LP, as I've never found a decent copy of any version of Dark Side of the Moon on vinyl. Also, one of my hypes is when a newly remastered LP of a single LP suddenly becomes a double LP, and it's bundled with previously unreleased tracks or demo versions or studio finds on master tapes. Now, the reason that, as far as I'm concerned, again, having listened to lots of these, the reason they were unreleased in the first time is because they just weren't darn good enough, and they are mostly rubbish, and very few of them seem to be worthwhile listening to. And somebody here states that they tried cleaning some of their new records in my ultrasonic cleaner, thinking it might be some pressing release agent, but no, they still had clicks. Really annoying. If, as I said, the stamper has got some debris in it, every single pressing that makes will have the inverse of that debris and will have a click. And no matter how much you clean it, it just won't go away. Similarly, any dust that's in the air that gets sucked into the during the pressing process, it's there forever. And that's why I get a new record, I wet wash it and vacuum it, and then I know when I play it for the very first time, if there are clicks, I either have to put up with them or I have to send the record back. And that's the modern vinyl way, I'm afraid. I've got records that are 30, 40, 50-year-old that have less pops and clicks on them than some of the modern pressings I've received recently. And I've decided that, well, I'm going to keep them because they're only a few pops and clicks. It would be nice to have a completely noise-free LP, but I think you have to accept that unless you're going to pay the extortionate prices for some of the really high-end pressings, which I freely admit I'm not willing to do. I have a notional limit of about £15 for a new pressing, and that's what I'll be sticking to. Supposedly improved mixings, remasterings, even some expensive audiophile reissues that just sound dull and lifeless compared to the LPs from the 60s and 70s. Well, again, the only one that I've got that I can compare is the Tina Turner, and that certainly was the case. I've had loads of comments to my post saying, no, I've got brilliant pressings. I've just had one just now. It said, the new Led Zeppelin reissues are brilliant, or are good, great, whatever. 180-gram records have deeper grooves, equals better and more bottom end, less chance of warping. Less chance of warping if they're not warped when you get them. But no, it's exactly the same groove as on a skinny record. The only thing you're getting is perhaps 45 grams more vinyl in there, which is just more expensive vinyl on there. So what makes 180 gram LPs better? They feel better in the hand, so I think it's a lot is psychological, placebo effect. I mean, they're nice to handle. You pick up the sleeve and you know there's something weighty in there. But it is the feel. And if you've got a really cheap turntable with a minuscule plastic platter, then the increased mass will, the sheer physics of it will reduce wow and flutter by a small marginal amount. So that's another benefit. I mean, I know there have been some great reissues. Again, if we go back to the Dark Side of the Moon, the Pink Floyd LP, and it's been flagged up to me that I need to hear the Bernie Grundman, a renowned mastering engineer. He's known to be able to increase the quality and detail in reproduction. His involvement alone is a much bigger difference to the end result than the extra 45 grams in additional vinyl. Well, again, it might be the case, but unless somebody's going to gift me one of these, I'm never going to find out. Purely on the grounds that I'm never going to pay that sort of money. To me, again, it's a thing to enjoy, to be listened, and I just won't pay exorbitant prices. I mean, I think that the current high street price of £30 odd for an LP is extortionate. As I mentioned on some previous videos, if you bring inflation to it, when I was paying £6 for albums I bought 25, 30 years ago, then inflation-wise, £30 about right. But not when you can buy CDs cheaper, then you can get a physical medium to listen to your music that doesn't involve paying over the odds. So I will always err towards CD rather than vinyl. Um, 95% of the best audiophile quality pressings don't even come close to the presence and optimal sound stage of the original pressings. I don't know, that again, that's a sweeping generalisation. Again, citing the Tina Turner, it's certainly the case from the one example I've come across. The only reissues I recently sought out some years back were some Rudy Van Gelder jazz reissues remastered by him on CD, and I found those to be very good, although even then they did suffer from bandwidth restriction. But because of the inherent ability of CD to have a higher bandwidth than LP, it became acceptable. And I probably splurged out on 30 odd of those over a year when they started bringing them out. And they were good. You have to know where you're purchasing the albums from, even if you're living in the UK. The two best record plants in the US are quality record pressings and MoFi. QPR changes its presses every 1,000 copies or so, and I would suggest that you get any of your recently reissued Steely Dan catalogue, and I can guarantee they sound 100% better than the originals you have. Well, changing the presser as it produces the LP every 1,000 copies will undoubtedly keep the quality high. However, it will also add phenomenally to the cost. I don't know how many LPs a normal pressing plant would aim to get out of a stamper, a pair. But I suspect it's more than 1,000. 100% better? No, I doubt that very much. Not even that. To suggest that anything coming out of these two plants are not as good as the originals, almost 180 recordings, is just plain rubbish. Okay? But I still won't pay the extortionate prices. So if you need to spend £100 or more to get a decent copy of a lump of plastic, a vinyl reissue, then you've just inherently damned the format to obscurity and to just people who've got money to burn. There is no way that a normal listening record collector could honestly afford that sort of outlay. And again, another one, purchased from Acoustic Sounds, aka Quality Records in the US. You won't be disappointed. Well, again, this is never going to happen. I did go on their site and had a look. They want $150 for Steely Dan's The Royal Scam. I'm happy with my original first pressing. It sounds absolutely fine to me. And as with my previous comment, if you have to spend £150, then there's something wrong with the format. And if my LP got damaged, then I just get a CD at £10 and I would know I'd be happy with that. I'm never going to hear one of these UHQR pressings, not at those sorts of prices. Again, as I say, unless somebody wants to gift me one or to try, and then I'll make an opinion. But there's no way that a 12-inch piece of vinyl is ever worth that sort of money, no matter how good it sounds. I'm happy with my original LPs and CDs. And then another comment, since you don't mention anything about your equipment, that might be why you can't hear the difference. No. No, there's nothing wrong with my equipment, and I won't be changing it anytime soon. And then finally, special nod to Audio Nonsense 1611. Had to add at the end, no Sandy Denny? So just for you, yeah, I've got some Sandy Denny. Okay, so that's kind of like the end of it really for me. I still don't like modern pressings. I can't afford these so-called super pressings, so I'm never going to know if they're any good or not, and I'm never going to want to have to afford them anyway. So nothing's changed my mind from any of the comments that I've received, and I'll say goodbye there. Thank you.